to go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and start with prayer, and then we'll get going here in just a second, okay? Okay, if anyone needs the lesson itself, it's going to go all the way to page 112. I just gave Brother Jim one of the lessons with the answers. And because I know sometimes people have a hard time keeping up. Basically, we are going to be probably starting at somewhere around page 107. And yeah, that's where we stopped at. But we're going to go ahead and get started with prayer first. And okay. Again, if you have the copies or the electronic version of this, obviously you don't need the paper unless you're going to be using it to do the fill in the blanks. So if you have the electronic version of this, which is the ABCs of Christian Maturity, it's a 447-page book with fill in the blanks, then you're already set. All you'll have to do is just get the answers and fill in the blanks, or in this case, if you study ahead, which I highly recommend studying ahead, so you'll have a little bit of an understanding, because I can't fill in all the blanks, or even if I fill in the blanks, I can't fill in all the subject. This is a vast subject, like many things. I mean, there are books and books written about finances, finances with a Christian perspective. Make sure that you take the time to kind of do some self-study and fill in the blanks on your own as well. And remember, we also had the end of life journal. Hopefully you're making some progress with getting that filled in, life insurance, or at least considering life insurance. Do you have a trust? Do you have a will? Do you know where it is? Does anyone else in your family knows where your important documents are? So that if you were to pass away or get very ill and, let's say, lose the ability to communicate, does anybody in your family have any idea what you want and where things are? Because nobody has any control of what will happen to them tomorrow or even 10 minutes from now. And when it happens, it's too late to be prepared. You're unprepared then. So, and I could personally say, filling the life journal out for myself in the life journal, I try to do a little bit maybe once a week, fill in the blanks. But I have to go look through stuff because to find some of the things that we've done over our lifetime. So you're thinking about 26 years of marriage going on 27 in a couple of days. You accumulate, you do a lot of things, you make a lot of decisions, you have a lot of stuff. And then before that, from many jobs and everything else, does anyone in your family knows exactly what's going on and what your desires are when you pass away, where the money is, things like that. Who owns the car? Who's going to get the car? And it gets more complicated with the more kids you have. Because then, you got 5 kids, and that's 5 things. What do you do with all the stuff you have? And because you don't want to be a problem for your children to make them to have them have difficulties because they may have the feeling that you like one over the more than the other, because you really didn't equitably be spread things out between the children. It can cause animosity. And some is perceived and some could be real in their mind. So just be aware of that. So we're still talking in area of finances. Our goal is to finish today. It goes all the way to page 112. So obviously I'm not going to finish all pages from 102 to 112. That means you're going to get to fill in the blank, and you really need to read, because a lot of this is about prioritizing and making some decisions that will take the rest of your life to perform. Or in some cases, for younger folks that maybe don't have any bills or anything yet, it's something that they would be able to go ahead and set some serious goals, because it's a lot easier to start off right than it is to try to fix what you did wrong. Trust me, I know all about that. All right, so let's go ahead and pray. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to study this area of finance, and help us as we finish with this and we go on to the gifts of the Spirit. And I pray that you would use every moment and every opportunity to help us to be a great testimony before those that are lost, that we might be able to draw them to you. I pray that you would help each one of us to have the right kind of wisdom and discernment in the decisions we make. And I pray that you would help each one of us to do better in the area of finances. But more importantly, that we would make sure that everything we do is to your honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So we actually stopped on page 107. Okay. And let me get you there. Page 107 is where we stopped at. Okay. Now, I got a little bit of a handout here, and I don't even have a copy for myself. Yeah, I got it. So this is a little bit of handout. I'll have Brother Don pass this out. I think the big thing that happens for this thing about finances, okay, is the American dream, right? It's either implied or it's perceived based on our experience, and also when you listen to the news. You have TV shows, maybe even preaching, where you kind of, in a sense, the American dream. Now, of course, this all came from the Declaration of Independence, right? And also found in our Constitution. So the American dream currently costs anywhere between $6 million to $4 million. The American dream, if you only have 2 children in a house. Okay, now you go like, yes, I did say 6 million, because this is the 2024. For instance, owning a car, on average, is $800,000, $811,000. If you count your lifetime, how many cars you've had in the past, how many cars you're going to have to the end of your life, you will have spent that much money. Okay, dying. When you die, believe it or not, costs money to die. It's nothing's free, and dying costs money. The average cost for dying right now for funerals is $8,000 per person. Okay. Retirement, recommended a minimum savings over a 20-year retirement plan is 1.5 or $1.6 million. Let's say you got to have that much money to retire, to live on. Because once you retire, you don't have an income, you have an annuity. That's what they call it. Because it just pays the same amount of money all the time, unless you kind of work for the state government as a teacher or something, because they do have some teaching programs, especially in California. That's why it's broke. It actually gives people raises like regular employees. And I knew a guy that was a fireman. He actually made more money after he retired per month than he did when he was still working. And judges, federal judges, actually get the same amount of money they were getting when they retired. You go like, how do you know that? Because I met a judge and he told me. He literally bragged about it. So, but the thing is what we call is the economy, inflation changes and gets higher. So whatever money you had in 2023 when you retired, it's not going to be nearly worth as much as in 2026, 28, 30, 34, 40. But you're going to be getting the same amount, or it'll be a little bit, but it won't be indexed in a way that it would continue to increase. So basically $1.6 million to retire. Taking a vacation over your lifetime for the American dream is an average of $179,000. Now, I know some of you may not take any vacations, but if you do take a vacation, that's pretty much how it works. If you add all your vacations together, especially when you have kids, you want to go to Disney, you want to go to Palo Duro, wherever you want to go, Palo Duro, to the national parks, state parks, Yellowstone, and all that kind of stuff. It starts to add up because the gas, you got to pay for gas, lodging, and all that kind of stuff. And then having pets. This is where I tried to save money. Because you buy a turtle, it's a lot cheaper. But average is $36,000 to own a dog. That's an inexpensive dog. Now you get insurance. People make insurance payments for dog insurance. You do that, right? They have dog hospitals. They have dog hotels. So when you go on vacation, you put the dog in a hotel. Yes, they do have that. And so there's some people say their dog is their child. I've met plenty of people said, I don't have no children, I got my dog, or my cat, or my cats. And then raising children. This one's the big one. This is only average. It's 2 children. $832,000 per child. Hey, honey, I think we saved a few dollars. $832,000. And like when we were living here, we moved here. We were going to move either here or South Carolina. Okay, South Carolina tuition for 1 year of college was like almost $30,000. Okay, so in Texas it was $0. Pretty easy, right? Go to Texas. But those are things that people pay for. There are parents that are paying for college, Bible colleges. I had a friend of mine. He graduated from Bob Jones. He was making payments for his loan for Bob Jones for 10 years after he graduated from college. Think about it. Buying a home, that's a really expensive one. It says 920 or $930,000. You know why, right? Because when you buy a home, that's just, you get in the house, you might have a house for $130,000, maybe in Texas, not in California. California, you can't get a condo for $500,000. You can't get a condo for $700,000. And then that, if it has any land at all, you're going to be paying somebody for landscaping. Our HOA was, what was it?
By the end, it started at 380, and by the end, it was like 560.
Okay, so $560 a month we paid just for HOA. That wasn't the house payment. That wasn't the mortgage. Okay, that wasn't the electric bill. That wasn't the sewage bill. That wasn't the water bill. So a home, and normally when you buy a home, you pay, at least some homes, you pay 20% down. And we live in an RV now, and we still had to pay 20% down for RVs. Getting married, $44,000 to get married. Okay? I'm into not, we didn't pay $44,000 to get married, but that's because she didn't want to spend a lot of money. So I was okay with that. But $44,000 to get married. Can you imagine that? Now, if you got more than, now in tradition, American tradition, getting married, the mom and dad pays for the girl that gets married. And the groom don't have to pay for nothing. He pays for the honeymoon, pretty much. So I guess I made out because my friend paid for our honeymoon. He kind of donated it to us. And the church paid for the reception. They made all the food. It was like a potluck. And we bought the dress, and the dress was pretty inexpensive because we went to one of those places that sells prom dresses and stuff like that, and we had a lady in church that could, our best friend, one of our friends, and she sewed it up and made it into the real deal, custom made. So we saved a few bucks. But there are people who get married and 5 years later are still making payments on their marriage. And some of those marriages don't even last past the payment program. Okay? They invest more in getting married than they do in staying married. Okay? Now so that is reality. It costs money to have a dream, an American dream. I know when me and my wife, we first got married, we went to a financial advisor, and he sat us down and says, what do you want to do? Literally, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do what are the things you want to own? What are the things where you want to live? What's your plan? And of course, it goes like, well, in order to do that, this is what you got to have. And I go like, okay, that's a lot. And the thing is although I had a plan, and our plan was not exactly the same as how it turned out, I think it turned out a whole lot better, because with God involved, it's way better. And that's the thing about finances. sure, we go over all these things that you need to do or you should do, but the more important thing is God first. Because I can tell you what, when we thought about going like, oh, I don't know how we're going to do this. We got all these responsibilities. And this is the money amount, and they don't add up. Somehow God always makes it way past. We end up with a surplus because we want to honor God, and He does better for you than you could ever do for yourself. All right. All right, let's go ahead and turn to Proverbs chapter 27. Proverbs 27. I thought I wanted to read that so we kind of get an idea of if you have a dream, and I say that to even young folks that are not married here. If you have a desire to have financial freedom, you want to be honoring to God and everything, including your finances, it doesn't start with just thinking about it. Okay? It starts with doing something about it. Getting a job, saving, having insurance, simple things. Having a car that works, that doesn't work on you, but works. Okay, Proverbs 27, and we're going to read verse 23. It says, "Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flock, and look well to thy herd. For riches are not forever, and doth the crown endure to every generation." So basically, diligence to know your state. So he's telling this herdsman, this handler of sheep or whatever flocks they might have, know what you have. It's important to know what you have, to do what you can for what your plans are in life. Is to know what your state is currently. Okay? What's your state? Do you know where all your bills are? Because you can't pay all your bills if you don't know where all your bills are. You can't manage your funds if you don't have any idea of what's going out and what's coming in. And that's a budget. Okay? So, if you look in here in verse 23, it's in that verse, it says, the instruction in this verse is to know the state of and look well to the things that produce our income. How are you getting your money? Now, I would say this is the first part of any Christian when it comes to even learning how to properly tithe. You have to know your income. What's your state? And, okay, so I know a lot of people go like, well, if I get money from this or this, then I don't have to worry about tithing that. Right? Some people say, well, I already tithe that. Like, for instance, tax returns. Okay, when you get your tax return, do you tithe your tax return? The Bible says it ought to be based on all your increases, not some of your increases. And a tax return is an increase. Okay? Do you tithe off of that? If you have a car accident and they pay you a payout, do you tithe that? You know, if you get a special check in the mail for whatever reason, they finally caught up with AT&T and found out how much they've been ripping us off forever, and they had a class action lawsuit, and all you had to do is sign your name, and next thing you know, you got a check for a couple $100. Do you tithe it? It's all income. It's all what God has provided you. So it is good to know your state. All right, in verse 27, it says this, of the same verse, 27, it says in Proverbs, and thou shalt have goats, milk enough for thy food, for the food of thy household, and for the maintenance of thy maidens. So pretty much says, hey, you do what you know your state, you do what you're supposed to do with your income, and you'll be able to support the needs in your household. Your property, your land, the people who work for you, the people within your household, God will take care of you. But oftentimes we do that verse reverse, we take care of ourselves instead of letting God take care of us. And whenever we're driving the train, we always fall short. At least I've noticed that. Whenever we're in charge of our income, we end up having less income to do with. And the more God is in charge of our income, the more we give to him, the more he gives to us. I don't know, it's a science to it. God just takes care of it. There are 3 questions to answer in order to properly plan a budget. Okay? First, where am I right now? Simple, right? Where are you? How much money do I get every month? Okay? And then where do I need to go? You figure out how much money you have coming in. You figure out how much debt you have. And then you can go somewhere. But if you are just continue paying bills and don't even know where all your bills are, then it's going to cause you problems. Now, this is real easy. You can get a computer. You don't even need a computer. You can have a cell phone. Download Excel or numbers if you got an Apple person. If you're a Google person, you can do Google spreadsheet program and it does a plus and minus, and you just you can say, give me a template for a budget. That simple. And you put it in, and then you say, okay, I'm going to write down all my income. You write it all down. And then it will give you a final number. And then you can say to yourself, okay, I got a final number. This is how much I'm getting every month. Now, the first thing you start off and goes, oh, what's 10% of that? Okay? So you got that. Next thing, all right, let me look at all my bills. I mean, pretty easy. They send them to you in the mail, or you get an email saying this is how much you owe. We're taking it from you this week, auto payment, because that's what happens. You add all those together, and he says, okay, this is how much. And then you go like, okay, now I know all of them. I wonder what the interest is on all of them, because, some of these people have lots of interest. 30% for this and 10% for that, which is probably rare to have 10%. You have really good credit if you got 10%. But most of the credit cards are somewhere around 18 to 30%. Okay, so you get all those. Now you do realize if they say 30%, that means 30 cents added to every dollar at the balance of every month. They add that to it. So that's how that one works. Okay, so we know that. So we know how much our debt is, the total amount of debt. We know our total income. If you just really want to start crying, all you got to do is just put the 2 numbers together and divide it and to change it into months, and then you go like, I'll never pay this. I'll die before the house gets paid for. Most people say that, and that's true. If you're like 70 and you have a 30-year mortgage and you just bought a house, you'll be dead before the house is paid for. That's just reality. Because a 30-year mortgage is a 30-year mortgage unless you start paying extra, which is okay. I'll get mortgage insurance, and then my kids will get a free house. No, just kidding. But that actually is possible. All right? I won't. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 3. Proverbs 16:3, if I can have someone read that. Proverbs 16:3.
Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established.
All right. So we figured out our budget. We know exactly what we have coming in. We know what's going out. We know how much it really cost us. We even know how long it's going to take us to pay it off, generally speaking. And then we say, okay, Lord, I need some help. I know exactly where I am now. I know my state. And I'm asking you to provide. Okay? So then it says, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. So you commit even your finances to God, and then your thoughts won't be so scattered. A lot of people get depressed, especially coming close to this time of year, from Black Friday on. They get all distressed because guess what? This is where everybody usually If their credit card wasn't maxed out, it will be now. Black Friday doesn't, the whole advertisement is to get you to buy even things you don't want. They get you to buy things you like. That's going to make you feel happy. Things that even somebody else in your family likes, because you heard them save, and they just want you to spend the money. They'll open your credit line and make it longer, higher credit. They'll give you tell you got a 60, we'll give you a plan, and you won't have to pay the balance off until 6 months from now. They don't tell you when you wait that 6 months. They throw all the percentages back from the 6 months that wasn't paid because the balance is no longer zero. It's all in the fine print. But God says, if you commit your ways, including your bills, He'll establish your thoughts, give you the peace that you need. All right. So prioritize a budget. As you're looking in there, these are some of the verses that are in the lesson about budgets themselves and how to establish a budget. And so you'll see those things on there, and I won't go over that for sake of time. But if you look at that square down there on page 108, it says budget category guidelines. And this is simple. Housing, food, household supplies, auto, insurance, both medical, all kinds of insurance that you might have. People have personal property insurance. People have car insurance. People have house insurance. You have all kinds of insurance you can have. Life insurance, death insurance. So there are lots of them. Then personal, clothing, what do you spend for your nails, pedicure, manicures, subscriptions, and believe it or not, they get you with subscriptions. You want to go broke? You get a subscription, especially if it's, an app subscription. Because they just kick it up next week, the next month, and the next month, and they just take it from you. And by the time you remember, I need to stop it, it's too late. A lot of these companies do this. They give you a subscription to something online, let's say, whether it be a TV or an app on a phone or whatever. They'll tell you they'll give you the first month free. They make it so hard to remember how to turn it off. So then there's another month, and then another month. And next thing you know, you're paying $6 a month for something that you don't even hardly ever use. But you got it to watch a free movie or a free this or a free that. Next thing you know, you're stuck with a thing. So be careful. So personal things, subscriptions, pets, hair care, debts to eliminate. There's surpluses. If you have any surpluses, let's say you get a raise or you get some extra money from somewhere or your family gives you money, those things will be considered a surplus if you're getting money from outside. How to properly use those. But budget categories are simple because you want to know how much money do I spend for housing. Now, believe it or not, there are some companies, credit card companies, that actually will do that for you, where you can actually, it'll divide, it'll show you what you spent your money on. And it'll give you an idea how much I spent for food. When I was younger and single, much younger and very single, I knew my budget for food. I spent, believe it or not, this is when I lived in Puerto Rico. I think I was stationed there. When I was stationed in Puerto Rico, I spent $33 a month for food. That's all I spent, was $33 a month for food. It was a pretty good deal. I can't even do that a week anymore. Right? I mean, you go to McDonald's and you're going to spend at least $15. Whataburgers, it might be 20. And that's for one meal. Right? I used to live on $33. That was my budget. I knew how much money I had. I could spend $33. Now, of course, I was in the military, so I started starving. I just go to the base. We can't do that here. So look at your budget and divide it up. Entertainment, because a lot of knowing is how much money you spend for entertainment, how much money you give for giving, how much money do you save. And I'll say this because saving is important, because a lot of Christians don't think they should save. And this has a net where you do 5%. You tithe 10%, you save 5%. of your income. I would say I think it should be almost the same. And the reason why I say 10 and 10 is because once you're retired, let's say you got that 10 that you put in there, then you can actually tithe that later as well once it becomes income. Because savings is not income until you start using it. Okay? Ask the IRS, they'll tell you. Savings is not income until you actually start using it. Okay? So you ought to have savings. No matter how old you ought to have some form of savings. My wife does this thing we have, it's called Acorn, right? And basically, when we buy something, it rounds up and takes the change and pays it into the account, no matter what it is. So if we pay $5.50 for something, it will take it and make it $6 and take the 50 cents and move it to a savings. So it have no change. It's called Acorn, and it becomes, and then it turns into an investment platform where they actually invest in stocks and bonds, things like that. And you don't even see it. They just kind of shave off what you earn, or what you pay for, that is. And you can get something like that no matter how old you are. You can establish one of those. And if you want to know more about that, you can ask my wife. I tell people all the time, they ask me, who's my financial, ask me, well, what about this? And you like would try to sell me solar or whatever. I said, you need to talk to my financial advisor. And then I point my wife out. I'm no dummy. I'm smart enough to know my wife is better at money than I am. I just get to teach the class. All right. So knowing your budget, having a budget, will help you to take control of your money. Okay? My wife likes to do this once, probably every 6 months, we have a budget meeting. Okay? And we have to, and she gets me, because she's the brains, right? And she takes care of most of the budget stuff. And a lot of this evolved from me being in the military, being deployed for 6-8 months out of the year. Sorry, I can't do no finances when I'm in the middle of the Persian Gulf. It just doesn't work out. So she's always taken that because since we've been married, that's the way it's been. So, and plus, when you go on a 6-month deployment, you come back and say, honey, I'm taking over all the bills again. It would take me another 6 months to figure out what I'm doing. And I'm like, she goes like, I'm going like, And she goes, you sure you don't want it back? It's a Bible thing. Take it back. I was like, no, honey, I don't need it. I know, I'm smart enough to know better. But anyway, so basically what happens, every 6 months we'll sit down and we'll talk. We'll go over all the numbers. That way she pushes it all back into my head. And my eyes go all blurry-eyed and I'm starting sweating. She goes like, these are all the bills. This is the percentage. And I have to kind of go over it with her. And so as a process of doing that, I'm up to speed. And then we make decisions for the next 6 months. And once we do that, then I know where we're at. She knows where we're at. She told me everything. There's nothing hidden. And we go from there. And so that's a good way, is always have a budget and be able to go over the budget. You may, for some families, maybe you do your budget once a year. Hopefully somewhere around time for around your pay raises, if you get pay raises. Sometimes we have to make adjustments if we get a pay raise, but I'm retired now, so I don't get a pay raise. Unless there's a cost of living increase, I'm not going to see any extra money. Not until I'm 62 when I fall from my Social Security retirement. All right, so, and that's very soon. All right, federal freedom for the future. Savings will help. Short-term savings and long-term savings. Now, if you look on here, you'll see the difference. No high-risk stuff. Now, when you're younger, you can do high risk. High-risk investments are great vehicles but any investments are based on, if I lose it, am I going to suffer? Does that make sense? So you have to be careful. But like if I living here, some of the great investments would be into the infrastructure of this area because it's growing. The state of Texas is a great place to invest money into because you got Elon Musk with the SpaceX and all the other things that are coming from Brownsville and stuff like that. There are great places to invest. So you want to look at that, and you can always get an investment advisor. And believe it or not, you don't have to be a millionaire to invest. You can do it small. Okay? So if you do 5% in savings, maybe 5% in investments. A lot of jobs, like government jobs, I work for Social Security, we had a 2-for-1. I gave $1, they gave $2 for the first 5% of what I put in. So that's a good place to start, but start early. Okay? Let's go ahead and I'm going to be finished, believe it or not. But the rest of this, all the way up to page 112, please make sure you go through this and read it and study it and kind of make a plan for yourself. Now, for folks that are older, know your budget so that your family will know your bills.